A wildlife photographer's drone captured a Bigfoot behind his cabin, but it wasn't attacking. It was carefully planting trees, protecting saplings like a parent guards their children. When a logging company offered him thousands to expose the creature so they could hunt it down, he faced an impossible choice. Profit from the footage or protect something the world would destroy. What he did next saved more than just a legend. The drone's propellers hummed like angry wasps as Ethan guided it over the pine canopy. 3 months since Sarah's funeral, and this was the first morning he'd woken up without that crushing weight on his chest. Maybe the silence of Pine Ridge was finally working. He adjusted the camera angle on his tablet, scanning for movement. A deer. Maybe a black bear rifling through fallen logs. Something ordinary he could photograph and pretend was worth the drive up here. The screen showed nothing but trees swaying in the September wind. "Come on," he muttered, pushing the drone deeper into the forest. "Give me something." Then the feed jerked sideways. Ethan's thumb froze on the controller. The camera had picked up something massive moving between the pines. Not the lumbering gait of a bear, but something upright, bipedal. His pulse quickened as he zoomed in. The figure stood at least 8 feet tall, covered in dark matted fur that caught the morning light like wet bark. But it wasn't the size that made Ethan's breath catch. It was what the creature was doing. It was dragging fallen pine trees, full-sized trees, not branches, across a clearing. One by one, it positioned them in a deliberate circular pattern, each trunk placed with careful precision. The creature would step back after each placement, tilt its head as if measuring angles, then adjust the position slightly. "No way," Ethan whispered. "No way this is real." He increased the altitude for a wider shot. The circle was nearly complete, maybe 40 feet in diameter. Inside the ring of trees, smaller branches had been woven together in what looked like protection, a barrier. The creature moved with purpose, not the random destruction of an animal, but the intentional construction of something planned, something intelligent. Ethan's hands trembled as he activated the 4K recording mode. This wasn't just strange animal behavior. This was. The creature stopped mid-motion. Its massive head swiveled upward, and for one heart-stopping second, Ethan could have sworn it was looking directly at the camera. At him. The tablet screen erupted in static. "No, no, no." Ethan frantically tapped the screen, but horizontal lines tore across the feed. The drone's altitude indicator spun wildly. Some kind of electromagnetic interference, but from what? Through the distortion, he caught a final glimpse. The creature's face, half hidden in shadow, but unmistakably aware. Not aggressive, not frightened, just observing. Then the screen went black. "Please don't crash. Please don't crash." Ethan switched to manual override, pulling the drone back toward the cabin on GPS alone. The feed flickered once, twice, then stabilized as the drone cleared the tree line. His legs felt weak as he brought it down onto the cabin's back deck. The moment it touched wood, he yanked the SD card from its housing like it might evaporate. Inside the cabin, Ethan's laptop sat surrounded by half-unpacked camera equipment and moving boxes he hadn't touched in weeks. He shoved aside a framed photo of Sarah, couldn't look at her smile right now, and jammed the SD card into the reader. The file loaded. 3 minutes and 42 seconds of footage. He watched it through once, hands pressed against his mouth. Then again, frame by frame, zooming in on the creature's methodical movements. The way it tested each tree trunk's weight. The gentle placement despite its obvious strength. The moment it looked up, that face, even through the fur and distance, there was something unnervingly human about the expression. Curiosity, maybe, or concern. Ethan's journalism instincts kicked in, the same instincts that had won him awards before Sarah got sick, before he'd abandoned everything to be by her hospital bed. Document, verify, question. He opened a new folder on his desktop, hesitated over the name, then typed, "Unknown subject, 01. The footage saved with a soft ping. For a long moment, Ethan just stared at the paused frame showing the creature mid-construction. In 3 years of wildlife photography, he'd filmed grizzlies, wolves, even a rare wolverine. But this? This was something else entirely. Something that wasn't supposed to exist. His phone buzzed. A text from his sister. "How's the hermit life? Found any squirrels to talk to yet?" Ethan almost laughed. Squirrels, right? He glanced back at the screen, at the impossible thing arranging trees in a circle for reasons he couldn't fathom. Part of him wanted to call someone, share this immediately. But who would believe him? And more importantly, what would happen to the creature if people did? The logging company signs he'd passed on the drive up flashed through his mind. Pine Ridge Development Project, bringing progress to our community. They'd already cleared 3 acres near the main road. His cursor hovered over the footage file. Sarah used to say he thought too much, that he'd analyze a sunset until he forgot to enjoy it. But she'd also taught him that some things were worth protecting, even when it cost you something. Especially then. Ethan locked his laptop and stood, walking to the cabin's back window. The forest stretched endlessly in the morning light, keeping its secrets. Somewhere out there, something impossible was building something inexplicable. And for the first time since Sarah died, Ethan felt that old familiar pull, the need to understand, to document, to uncover truth. He just had no idea how dangerous that truth would become. The Pine Ridge General Store smelled like coffee and old wood, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and strangers were noticed immediately. Ethan grabbed a basket and headed for the battery aisle, trying to look like just another tourist stocking up. He needed solar batteries for the drone. After what he'd seen, he wasn't leaving that forest alone. "Help you find something?" The cashier, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a name tag reading Marla, watched him from behind the counter. "Just batteries. The rechargeable kind." "Photographer." She nodded at the camera bag slung over his shoulder. "Wildlife." Mostly Ethan kept his voice casual. "Renting the Kowalski cabin for a few months." Something flickered across her face. "The one backing up to the old forest." Before Ethan could respond, the door chimed and 3 men in company jackets walked in, Cascade timber embroidered across their backs. They moved like they owned the place, heading straight for the coffee station. Ethan pretended to examine battery packages while listening. "Third set of steaks this week." One of them grumbled, pouring coffee into a styrofoam cup. "Something's pulling them right out of the ground." "Bent the metal ones." "Probably that same vandal," another replied. "Sheriff says kids from Millbrook are driving up here causing trouble." The third man, older with a graying beard, snorted. "Kids don't bend steel stakes. And they sure don't move survey equipment half a mile into the woods." "Then what do you think it is, Frank?" Frank's voice dropped lower. "I think something doesn't want us cutting in that section. And I think we ought to listen." "You getting superstitious on us?" "I'm getting smart. My daddy logged these woods for 30 years, and he always said there were places you just don't go. Old treaties, old warnings. Your daddy also believed in forest spirits and—" "Keep your voice down." Frank's tone went sharp. "You want Marla hearing you mock the old ways? Her grandmother was." They moved toward the register, and Ethan quickly turned back to the batteries, heart racing. Survey stakes. Equipment moved. The creature from his footage was strong enough to drag full trees. Bending metal stakes would be nothing. He grabbed 2 packages of batteries and approached the counter, timing it so the timber workers were just finishing their purchase. As Frank passed, Ethan caught his eye. "Excuse me." "I couldn't help overhearing. What section of the forest are you working on?" The men exchanged glances. Frank's expression went carefully neutral. "North section, past Clearwater Creek." "Why?" "Just curious. I've been photographing wildlife up there. Saw some interesting animal patterns yesterday, trees arranged in circles, that kind of thing." "Any idea what could do that?" The temperature in the store seemed to drop 10 degrees. Marla's hand froze on the scanner. The timber workers went silent. Even the radio playing soft country music seemed to dim. "Storms," Marla said finally, not meeting his eyes. "Wind patterns can do strange things to fallen trees. These trees looked deliberately placed. Like I said, wind patterns." Her voice had gone flat, final. She scanned his batteries with sharp, quick movements. That'll be $32.50. Frank leaned in slightly as he headed for the door. Listen, friend. Maybe stick to photographing deer. The back country's got rough terrain. Easy to get lost or hurt. It wasn't quite a threat, but it wasn't friendly advice either. The door chimed as the timber workers left. Through the window, Ethan watched them climb into a white van with the Cascade Timber logo. The same van he'd seen parked near the trailhead yesterday. Anything else? Marla asked pointedly. Ethan handed her two 20s. As she made change, an older man emerged from behind a shelf of canned goods. Flannel shirt, weathered face, the kind of local who'd probably been born in these mountains. He set down a box of ammunition with deliberate slowness, his eyes fixed on Ethan. That forest doesn't want you there, he said quietly. Never has wanted outsiders poking around. Smart people learn that quick. Dad. Marla shot him a warning look. What are you talking about? Ethan asked. The old man's jaw tightened. I'm talking about respect. That land's been here longer than any of us, and it's got its own ways of dealing with people who don't listen. He grabbed his ammunition and headed for the door, then paused. Your cabin backs right up to the sacred grove. The old people used to leave offerings there. Keep the peace. Then the young folks stopped believing, stopped caring. Sacred grove. But the old man was already gone, the door swinging shut behind him. Ethan stood there, change in hand, feeling the weight of Marla's stare. He's just superstitious, she said, but her voice carried no conviction. Old stories, old fears. Nothing to worry about. Ethan pocketed his change and batteries. What kind of stories? The kind that keep people safe. Marla's expression softened slightly, and for just a moment, she looked genuinely concerned. Look, I don't know what you saw up there, but whatever it was, just let it be. Some things are better left alone. As Ethan drove back toward the cabin, the old man's words echoed in his mind. That forest doesn't want you there. But something in that forest was building, creating, protecting something. And the people in this town knew about it, had probably known for generations. They weren't just keeping secrets. They were keeping a guardian hidden. 2 days of watching the footage frame by frame had driven Ethan half crazy. He'd barely slept, his mind churning with questions nobody in town would answer. The creature's face haunted him, not with fear, but with the mystery of its purpose. What was it building? And why? On the third day, just as dusk painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Ethan made his decision. He loaded the drone into his backpack and hiked to the cliff overlook on the eastern edge of his property. A rocky outcrop that gave a panoramic view of the valley below. From up here, he could see everything without getting close, without disturbing whatever was happening down there. The drone launched smoothly, its camera angling down as Ethan guided it over the darkening canopy. He kept it high this time, minimizing the sound. The last thing he wanted was another electromagnetic interference incident. For 15 minutes, he saw nothing but trees and shadows lengthening across the forest floor. Then movement. Ethan's breath caught. There, near a cluster of young saplings, the creature emerged from the tree line. In the fading light, its dark fur seemed to absorb the shadows, making it almost spectral. But it wasn't the creature that made Ethan zoom in closer. It was what the creature was doing. The being moved methodically around a group of 6 young pine saplings, each no taller than 10 feet. With extraordinary care, it was arranging river stones. Smooth, heavy rocks that must have been carried from the creek a quarter-mile away, in protective circles around each tree's base. Not randomly, with precision. The creature would place a stone, step back, adjust it slightly, then move to the next sapling. Its massive hands, easily capable of snapping tree trunks, handled the stones with the delicacy of a gardener tending seedlings. You're protecting them, Ethan whispered, his voice swallowed by the wind on the clifftop. The creature paused at one sapling and did something that made Ethan's throat tighten. It reached out and gently touched the young tree's topmost branch. Its fingers, God, they looked almost human, brushing the needles with what could only be described as tenderness. parent checking on a child. Then the creature moved on, continuing its work, and Ethan panned the camera wider to capture the full scene. That's when he saw them. Metal glints in the undergrowth. His blood went cold as he zoomed in. Bear traps, 5 of them, half buried in the soil and dead leaves, positioned in a deliberate pattern. And the pattern wasn't random. Each trap was placed exactly where the creature would naturally walk while tending to the saplings. Someone had studied its movements. Someone had planned this. Ethan's hand trembled on the controller. The traps were military-grade, the kind that could snap a bear's leg like a twig. Against something that size, they might not kill immediately, but they'd maim. They'd cause agony. And worse, they'd immobilize. The creature finished with the last sapling and stood, surveying its work. For a moment, it was perfectly still, silhouetted against the dying light like some ancient statue. Then it turned and began walking back toward the deeper forest, directly toward one of the traps. "No, move." Ethan urged uselessly, his heart hammering. The creature's foot hovered inches from the trigger plate. Then it stopped, its head tilted downward, and even from this distance, Ethan could see the posture change. The creature had spotted the trap. Slowly, deliberately, it stepped around the concealed metal jaws and continued into the forest, disappearing into the shadows. It knew the traps were there. How many times had it walked this path, avoiding death by inches? Ethan brought the drone back, his mind racing. As it landed on the cliff beside him, he immediately pulled the SD card and secured it in his jacket's inner pocket. His hands were shaking, not from cold, but from rage and something else he couldn't quite name. Someone was hunting this creature. Not for sport, not for science. For elimination. The logging company's words came back to him. "We'll pay for clear drone footage of the vandal." They wanted proof. Proof they could use to justify a kill order, to clear the problem so their equipment and survey stakes would stay put. So they could cut down whatever they wanted without interference. The creature wasn't vandalizing anything. It was protecting its home. Protecting the young trees from being destroyed. And someone wanted it dead for that. Ethan hiked back to the cabin in darkness, using his phone's flashlight to navigate the trail. Inside, he downloaded the footage to his encrypted external hard drive, the same one he'd used for sensitive journalism work years ago. He created a backup, then another. This footage couldn't disappear, couldn't be confiscated or lost if someone came asking questions. As the files copied, Ethan stared at the paused image on his screen. The creature's hand touching that sapling with impossible gentleness. Sarah had spent her last months volunteering at a community garden, even when the chemo left her barely able to stand. "Things that grow need protecting," she'd said once. Her hands deep in soil, planting tomatoes she'd never lived to harvest. That's what makes us human. Choosing to nurture instead of destroy. Ethan closed his eyes against the memory. When he opened them, his jaw was set with new determination. If someone was coming for this creature, they'd have to go through him first. The Pine Ridge Community Center was packed. Ethan slipped into a back row seat just as the meeting started, curious about the flyer he'd seen stapled to the general store's bulletin board. Public Forum on Forest Management. A man in a crisp polo shirt and khakis stood at the front, a Cascade Timber logo on his breast pocket. Behind him, a projector displayed glossy images of logging equipment and processed lumber. "Good evening, folks. I'm Derek Mills, Regional Manager for Cascade Timber. We've been part of this community for 15 years, providing jobs and supporting local families." His smile was practiced, professional. "But we've got a problem." He clicked to the next slide, a photo of bent survey stakes and overturned equipment. "Over the past 2 months, we've experienced significant vandalism on our northern tract. Survey stakes removed, equipment relocated, and just last week, one of our newer caterpillars was found with its hydraulic lines torn clean out." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "The damage totals over $40,000. Ethan sat forward. "Hydraulic lines torn out? That required serious strength. Now, we've tried to handle this quietly," Mills continued. "But the vandalism is escalating. and it's happening deep in the forest where there shouldn't be anyone. We believe we're dealing with a large, aggressive animal, possibly a rogue bear or a mountain lion defending territory. Frank, the timber worker from the store, sat in the third row, arms crossed. He didn't look convinced. What we're asking for, Mills said, is permission to conduct a controlled hunt in the affected area.
Professional trackers, proper permits, minimal disruption.
We simply need to eliminate the threat before someone gets hurt. You mean before your profits get hurt? Someone called out. Mills's smile never wavered. We care about safety first. But yes, we also care about our business. The longer this continues, the longer our crews can't work, which means local families don't get paid. A woman near the front raised her hand. What kind of animal tears out hydraulic lines? Bears can be remarkably destructive, ma'am, especially when— I've lived here 60 years, she interrupted. Never seen a bear do anything like that. Mills shifted tactics smoothly, which is why we need experts to investigate properly. We're also offering a reward, $5,000 for clear photographic or video evidence of the animal responsible. If anyone has trail cameras or drone footage from the northern tract, we'd appreciate your cooperation. Ethan's blood ran cold. They were crowdsourcing surveillance. After 20 more minutes of discussion, locals divided between those who needed the timber jobs and those who mistrusted corporate presence. The meeting ended. Ethan tried to leave quickly, but Mills appeared at his elbow. Excuse me, you're the photographer, right? Renting the Kowalski cabin? Ethan's stomach dropped. How did you? Small-town Mills's smile was friendly, but his eyes were calculating. Marla mentioned you've been flying a drone around. Getting some good shots. Just wildlife. Personal project. Interesting timing. Mills handed him a business card. Look, I'll be straight with you. We need documentation of what's out there. You've got professional equipment, you know the area now. If you capture clear footage of whatever's causing this damage, that $5,000 reward is yours. Could probably sell the footage to news outlets too. Make it worth your while. I'm not interested in bounty hunting. It's not bounty hunting, it's documentation. Evidence for wildlife management. Mills lowered his voice. Between you and me, some of the old-timers here are superstitious. They'll block any reasonable solution because of stories their grandparents told them. But you're an outsider, a professional. You understand that progress and preservation can coexist. Ethan tucked the card in his pocket without looking at it. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. The company's getting pressure from investors, and there are more aggressive solutions we could pursue if this continues. Mills's friendly mask slipped slightly. Would be better for everyone if we handled this cleanly. Humanely. The implied threat hung in the air. As Ethan walked to his truck, he noticed Frank leaning against a rusted pickup, watching him. He get to you? Frank asked. Tried to. Frank nodded slowly. That footage you mentioned at the store, the trees in circles. You still got it. Ethan hesitated. Why? Because if you do, and if it shows what I think it shows, you need to be careful. Real careful. Frank glanced around to make sure they were alone. Mills isn't just worried about equipment. 3 weeks ago, one of our crew found something in the northern section. A clearing with dozens of saplings planted in perfect rows. Trees that weren't there the season before. Someone, or something, is reforesting faster than we can cut. That's impossible. That's what I said. But I saw it myself. Young pines, perfectly healthy, arranged like someone planted an orchard. Frank's expression was grim. The company wants that land cleared before investors visit next month. And they don't want questions about what's living there or what it's doing. You understand? Ethan understood perfectly. The creature wasn't just protecting existing forest. It was actively restoring it. Replanting. Healing what had been destroyed. And Cascade Timber saw that as a declaration of war. They're not looking for documentation, Frank said quietly. They're looking for justification. So whatever you captured on that drone, whatever you think you know, keep it buried. Because the moment Mills gets proof of something valuable out there, he won't send wildlife management. What will he send? Frank met his eyes. People who make problems disappear. For the right price. He climbed into his truck and drove off, leaving Ethan standing in the parking lot with Mills's business card burning a hole in his pocket. That night, Ethan triple-checked the locks on his cabin doors and moved his encrypted hard drive to a lockbox under the floorboards. The creature had been there for who knows how long, quietly tending the forest. Now someone wanted to turn it into a trophy or a corpse. The storm hit on the sixth night like nature's own fury. Ethan woke to thunder that shook the cabin's walls and lightning that turned midnight into strobing daylight. Rain hammered the roof with such violence he thought the shingles might tear away. The power had died hours ago, leaving only his emergency lantern casting shadows across the bedroom. He'd been dreaming of Sarah again, her hands in garden soil, planting seeds she'd never see bloom. He hated those dreams, hated waking up and remembering all over again. A crack of wood splitting cut through the storm's roar. Ethan sat up, heart pounding. That wasn't thunder. That was a tree branch close to the cabin. Another crack. Then the sound of something heavy moving through the underbrush behind the house. His first instinct was to stay put, lock the doors, wait for dawn. But years of documenting wildlife had taught him that understanding required observation, and observation required courage. He grabbed his flashlight and camera, pulled on his jacket, and crept to the back window. Lightning flashed, illuminating the tree line. And there it was. The creature stood at the edge of the clearing, rain streaming down its dark fur in rivulets. Even hunched against the storm, it towered over 8 feet tall, its massive frame silhouetted against the violent sky. Ethan's hand found his camera, switching it to night mode. He had to document this, had to prove to himself this was real. But the creature wasn't approaching the cabin. It was moving parallel to the tree line, focused on something else entirely. Another lightning strike revealed what? The young saplings he'd seen in his drone footage, the ones the creature had been protecting with stones. The storm was destroying them. Hail the size of golf balls pelted down, branches whipped by hurricane-force winds, and debris from larger trees crashed around them. And the creature was trying to save them. Ethan watched, transfixed, as the being moved from tree to tree with startling speed. It grabbed fallen branches, huge limbs that would take 2 men to lift, and positioned them as windbreaks around the vulnerable saplings. When hail tore through the canopy, the creature used its own body as a shield, crouching over the young trees and taking the beating itself. "My God!" Ethan whispered. The creature moved to another sapling that had been bent nearly horizontal by the wind. With careful precision, it straightened the young tree and braced it with stones and debris, creating a support structure that could withstand the storm's assault. It wasn't random. It wasn't animal instinct. This was problem-solving. This was intelligence and care combined with desperate determination. Lightning cracked directly overhead. So close Ethan felt the static electricity raise the hair on his arms. In that brilliant white flash, he saw the creature's face clearly for the first time.
No ray, no egrestion, no monster.
Just focus, determination, and something that looked painfully like worry. The creature finished bracing the sapling and moved to the next one, but its movements were slowing. Even something that powerful had limits. The storm was winning. Ethan made a decision he'd probably regret. He unlocked the back door and stepped onto the porch, rain immediately soaking through his jacket. The creature's head snapped toward him, and for one terrible moment, they simply stared at each other across 30 yards of storm-ravaged clearing. Ethan raised his hands slowly, showing he held nothing but a camera. "I'm not here to hurt you," he shouted over the wind, knowing the words were useless but needing to say them anyway. The creature remained motionless, watching. Then Ethan did something that Sarah would have called either brave or stupid. He walked down the porch steps toward the tree line, toward a fallen branch longer than he was tall. He grabbed one end and began dragging it toward the saplings, adding his effort to the creature's work. The creature's posture shifted. Its head tilted slightly, processing this unexpected development. Ethan positioned the branch as a windbreak for one of the exposed saplings, mimicking what he'd seen the creature doing. It wasn't much, his strength was laughable compared to the being watching him, but it was something. When he looked up, the creature had moved closer. Not threatening, just observing. For 10 seconds, they stood there in the rain, human and cryptid, both soaked and exhausted, both trying to protect something fragile from nature's violence. Then the creature did something extraordinary. It turned away, presenting its back, the ultimate gesture of trust, and returned to its work, moving to the farthest saplings while Ethan handled the ones near the cabin. They worked in silent partnership for 20 minutes. Ethan dragged branches, positioned stones, propped up bent trees. The creature did the heavy work, moving debris that would have crushed Ethan, creating barriers that could actually withstand the wind. Not once did it threaten him. Not once did it show aggression. When the worst of the storm finally passed, the creature finished securing the last sapling. It stood slowly, water streaming from its fur, and turned to face Ethan one final time. In the dim light of Ethan's fallen flashlight, its eyes, dark and deep and impossibly aware, met his. Then it touched one of the saplings gently, the same tender gesture Ethan had captured on the drone footage, and melted back into the forest without a sound. Ethan stood alone in the aftermath, shaking from cold and adrenaline and something bigger than fear. He'd been wrong from the beginning. This wasn't a monster hiding in the woods. It was a guardian, caretaker, a being that had chosen protection over its own safety, nurturing over violence. And someone wanted to kill it for defending its home. Back inside the cabin, Ethan toweled off and stared at the photos on his camera. Images of the creature mid-rescue, its face illuminated by lightning, completely focused on saving the vulnerable trees. His fear had evaporated somewhere in that storm, replaced by something far more powerful. Empathy, and an iron determination that nobody was going to harm this being while he had breath in his body. 3 days of uneasy peace followed the storm. Ethan checked the saplings each morning. All of them had survived, standing straight in their protective stone circles like small monuments to what he'd witnessed. He hadn't seen the creature since that night, but he felt its presence. Small signs, freshly placed stones around new growth, broken branches cleared from pathways, and once, a stack of kindling left near his cabin door. A gift, a thank you. On the 9th day, gunshots shattered the morning silence. Ethan bolted upright, coffee mug clattering to the floor. The shots came from the north, maybe a mile away near Clearwater Creek. 3 sharp cracks, then silence. His stomach twisted. Hunting season didn't start for another 2 weeks. He grabbed his jacket and hiking boots, moving fast. 20 minutes of hard hiking brought him to the creek crossing, where fresh tire tracks cut through the mud. A heavy vehicle, probably a truck. More tracks.
Bootprints.
At least 3 different sets. Then he heard voices. Ethan crept forward, staying low behind a fallen log. Through the trees, he spotted them. 3 men in tactical gear, not hunting clothes, but military-style vests and cargo pants. They were setting up equipment near the creek. More traps, but these were different. Cage traps with electronic sensors, and bottles of liquid lined up on a fallen log. "Spread the bait every 30 yards, one man said, his voice carrying through the forest. He was tall, scarred, with the bearing of someone who'd done this kind of work before. "Whatever it is, it's got to eat." "You really think poison's gonna work on something that big?" Another asked, younger, nervous. "It'll work. Everything's got a weakness. You just gotta find it." Ethan's blood ran ice cold. These weren't licensed hunters or wildlife management. These were exterminators. "What about the photographer?" the 3rd man asked. "Mills said some guy's been flying drones around here." "Mills says a lot of things. We do our job, collect our pay, and get out. If some camera-happy tourist gets in the way, that's his problem." The scared man checked his rifle. "I still don't get why Mills doesn't just use his own security. Because this needs to look like an accident. A wild animal attack gone wrong. Nobody asks questions about a dangerous predator that had to be put down." The leader secured a trap mechanism with practiced efficiency. "We find it, we trank it first for photos, Mills wants proof, then we finish it. Clean, quiet, professional. What if it's actually, what the locals say? What, Bigfoot? The leader laughed. Even better. You know what a real specimen would sell for? Mills gets his land cleared, we get bonuses, and maybe we retire early selling whatever's left to the right buyers. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. They were talking about the creature like it was merchandise, like its life meant nothing beyond profit and inconvenience. He needed to get back to the cabin, needed to warn. A twig snapped under his boot. The leader's head whipped around. You hear that? Ethan didn't wait. He ran, crashing through undergrowth, no longer caring about stealth. Shouts erupted behind him. He couldn't tell if they were following, didn't dare look back. He reached the cabin 20 minutes later, lungs burning. His truck sat in the driveway, but something was wrong. Deep gouges marked the driver's side door. For parallel scratches that could have been claws but were too deliberate, too measured. A warning. The porch was worse. Someone had carved words into the railing with a knife. Crude but unmistakable. Stay out of our way. They'd been here. They knew where he lived. Ethan's hand shook as he unlocked the door. Inside, nothing appeared disturbed, but the violation hung in the air. They'd come to his home, had probably looked through the windows, assessed him as a threat or an obstacle. He grabbed his laptop and external hard drives, stuffing them into his backpack. If they came back, when they came back, they couldn't find the footage. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. Mr. Crane, it was Mills's voice, smooth and cold. I hear you've been hiking near restricted areas. That's not safe, especially with dangerous wildlife active. Restricted areas? This is public land. Public land we have commercial permits for, and we've had reports of trespassers interfering with legitimate pest control operations. Mills paused. I'd hate for there to be any accidents. The forest can be dangerous for people who don't know what they're doing. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. You're new here, Mr. Crane. You don't understand the situation. But I'm told you've recently experienced loss. A wife, wasn't it? Cancer. The casual cruelty in his tone made Ethan's jaw clench. Seems like you came here for peace and quiet. I'd recommend focusing on that. Photography, solitude, healing. Not involving yourself in matters that don't concern you. And if I do, then I can't guarantee your safety. Like I said, the forest is dangerous. Accidents happen. People disappear. Mills's voice hardened. My men found boot prints near their equipment this morning. If I find out you've been tampering with legally placed animal control measures, there will be consequences. Legal ones. Are we clear? Ethan wanted to threaten him back, to promise he'd expose everything. But he knew men like Mills. They didn't make empty threats. Crystal clear, Ethan said tightly. Good. Enjoy your solitude, Mr. Crane, and stay away from the northern tract. For your own good. The line went dead. Ethan sat on his couch, backpack full of hard drives, staring at the carved warning on his porch railing. They'd researched him, knew about Sarah, knew he was isolated, vulnerable, grieving. They thought that made him weak. They thought he'd back down to protect himself. They were wrong. He'd already lost everything that mattered, which meant he had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat by the window with his camera, watching the tree line, waiting for any sign of the creature, hoping he could warn it somehow, before the hunters found it first. On the 10th day, Ethan broke every rule he'd set for himself. He'd spent the previous night planning, pacing, arguing with himself. The smart thing would be to leave, pack up, drive away, let nature take its course. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw the creature kneeling beside those saplings, protecting them with its body during the storm. Some things were worth protecting even when it cost you something. Sarah's words. Always Sarah's words. At dawn, Ethan loaded the drone with a fresh battery and hiked to the cliff overlook. But this time he didn't go alone. He'd stopped at the general store first, ignoring Marla's worried glances, and bought emergency flares. The kind hikers used for rescue signals. If he couldn't speak to the creature, maybe he could at least distract the hunters long enough for it to escape. The drone launched into morning mist, and Ethan guided it toward the northern tract, following the trail the hunters had left. His hands were steadier now. Fear had crystallized into purpose. The camera feed showed the forest floor, and then he saw them. The hunters, spreading out in formation, moving toward the sapling grove with military precision. They had rifles, tranquilizer guns, and something else. A portable speaker playing distress calls. Wounded animal sounds meant to draw out predators. Ethan's heart hammered. He pushed the drone higher, scanning desperately. Then he found it. The creature knelt in the grove, exactly where Ethan had seen it before, hands resting gently on the saplings, as if listening to something humans couldn't hear. The morning light caught its fur, turning it bronze and gold. It looked peaceful, completely unaware of the danger closing in. "No, no, no, move. Please move," Ethan whispered. A shot cracked through the forest. The drone camera jerked as Ethan flinched. On the screen, the creature's head snapped up, instantly alert. The hunters were maybe 200 yards away now, moving faster. Ethan made a split-second decision that would change everything. He sent the drone into a steep dive, bringing it directly into the creature's line of sight, then landed it on the ground just yards from where it knelt. The creature stared at the drone, head tilting in what looked like recognition. It remembered, from that first day from the storm. It knew this machine was connected to the human who'd helped protect the trees. Through the camera, Ethan could see the creature's face clearly. Those dark, intelligent eyes focused on the lens, on him somehow across the distance. "I'm sorry," Ethan said aloud, knowing it couldn't hear. "I'm so sorry I brought this to you." Another shot, closer this time. The creature's posture tensed. Then Ethan did the most reckless thing he'd ever done. He grabbed the emergency flares from his pack, struck 3 of them simultaneously, and hurled them off the cliff in the opposite direction from the grove, toward where he'd heard the shots. Brilliant red smoke erupted, visible for miles. The hunters would have to investigate. They'd think it was a signal, maybe another hunter in distress. It might buy minutes, maybe seconds, but it was something. On the drone feed, the creature suddenly moved, not away from danger, but toward the young saplings. As another shot rang out, closer still, the creature positioned itself directly between the trees and the direction of the gunfire, shielding them. Even now, facing death, its first instinct was to protect. Ethan watched, throat tight, as the creature carefully moved the saplings, actually uprooted them with extraordinary gentleness and repositioned them behind its own massive body. It was using itself as a living barrier, prioritizing the trees over its own survival. "You beautiful, impossible thing," Ethan breathed. The hunters' voices carried through the drone's microphone now, closer but confused by the flares. "What the hell? Did Martinez signal?" "Martinez is on the south ridge. That's north. Check it out." Whatever made that noise might have spooked our target anyway. The creature remained motionless, the saplings secured behind it, waiting. Those eyes never left the drone camera. In that moment, Ethan understood something profound. This being wasn't just protecting individual trees. It was protecting the future, the next generation of forest, the continuation of something ancient and essential. It saw further than humans did, understood connections they'd forgotten. It wasn't guarding the forest. It was raising it, nurturing it, teaching it to survive the way a parent teaches a child. And humans wanted to destroy it for that. The voices faded as the hunters moved toward the flares. Ethan sent a command to the drone, "Return home." As it lifted off, the creature watched it go, then turned and melted into the forest with the saplings somehow carried along, leaving no trace it had ever been there. On the hike back to his cabin, Ethan's mind raced. The flares had bought time, but not much. The hunters would return. They'd set more traps, spread more poison, keep hunting until they succeeded. Unless Ethan gave them what they wanted. Sort of. Back at the cabin, he opened his laptop and began editing. He pulled clips from all his footage, the creature moving, building, protecting. But he corrupted them deliberately, added motion blur, reduced resolution, stabilized the shaky parts until they looked suspiciously smooth, made it look exactly like what people expected Bigfoot footage to look like. Fake. He uploaded the video to YouTube with a clickbait title, "Real Bigfoot Caught on Drone? You won't believe this." Within hours, the comments rolled in, "Obviously CGI, nice try, buddy, fake as hell, the blur gives it away, perfect." By the next morning, Cascade Timber's corporate office had seen it. Mills called, his voice dripping with contempt. "Nice hoax, Mr. Crane. Very creative. I assume you're hoping for YouTube revenue." "Just sharing what I found," Ethan said innocently. "What you found is unconvincing amateur footage that proves nothing. My investors are satisfied there's no credible evidence of anything unusual in that forest. We'll proceed with the northern tract as planned." But his tone had changed. The urgency was gone. A blurry hoax video had accomplished what Ethan hoped. It made the creature seem like fiction. Not worth hunting. Not worth the liability. The hunters left Pine Ridge that afternoon. 2 weeks passed like a held breath slowly released. Ethan monitored the news obsessively. Cascade Timber announced a revised development plan that avoided the northern tract entirely. Something about soil instability and environmental concerns. Frank sent him a single text. "You did good." The traps were removed. The poison baits cleared. The forest went quiet again, except for the wind and birdsong. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Not really. On his last day in Pine Ridge, the cabin rental ending, his savings depleted. He stood on the back porch at dawn, coffee in hand, watching the tree line one final time. He'd be heading back to the city tomorrow, back to his empty apartment and the life he'd been running from. Part of him didn't want to leave. Another part knew he had to. Before packing, Ethan made one last trip into the forest. He hiked to the sapling grove, half expecting to find it empty or destroyed. Instead, he found something miraculous. The 6 saplings had grown. Not just survived, thrived. They stood taller, fuller, their branches reaching toward the canopy with impossible vitality. The stone circles remained, but now wildflowers grew between them, creating natural gardens around each tree. And there were more. Dozens more saplings planted in careful rows extending deeper into the forest. Each one protected. Each one positioned for maximum sunlight and growth. The creature hadn't just been defending this small grove. It had been building a restoration, reclaiming what logging companies had destroyed over decades, tree by tree, season by season, with patience humans couldn't fathom. Ethan knelt beside one of the original saplings, touching the bark gently. "Keep growing," he whispered. "Someone's watching over you." Back at the cabin, he made his final preparation. He'd purchased a solar-powered wildlife camera, the expensive kind with cellular connection and encrypted cloud storage. He hiked a half-mile into the forest, found a massive oak with clear sightlines to the grove, and mounted the camera 20 feet up, camouflaged among the branches. He configured it to send photos directly to his phone when motion was detected. Then he activated it and climbed down. "Just want to make sure you're okay," he said to the empty forest. "That's all." The drive away from Pine Ridge felt heavier than it should. In the rearview mirror, the mountains receded, and with them, the strangest chapter of Ethan's life since Sarah died. He'd come here looking for solitude and found purpose instead. Found something worth protecting in a world that seemed determined to destroy anything it couldn't profit from. 3 weeks later, living in his city apartment and freelancing for nature magazines again, Ethan's phone buzzed during breakfast. Motion detected. He opened the app expecting deer or maybe a bear. The photo loaded slowly, and when it resolved, Ethan's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. The creature stood in the grove, but it wasn't alone. A smaller figure, still massive by human standards but clearly younger, stood beside it, watching as the larger being demonstrated how to position stones around a newly planted sapling. Teaching. The next photo showed them working together, the younger one mimicking the elder's careful movements. There were 2 of them, maybe more. This wasn't just a guardian. It was a family, culture, a continuation. Over the following days, more photos arrived. The creatures tending the grove, planting new saplings, removing invasive species. Always careful, always purposeful. Ethan watched through his phone screen, documenting everything but sharing nothing. Then, on a Thursday morning, a photo came through that stopped his heart. The larger creature stood directly in front of the camera, filling the frame. It had climbed the tree, something that should have been impossible for something that size, and retrieved the camera from its hiding spot. The next photo was taken from ground level, pointing up at Ethan's cabin porch. His cabin, 200 miles away. Ethan's hands shook as he scrolled to the next image, sent just minutes ago according to the timestamp. The camera sat on his apartment doorstep in the city. He could see his welcome mat, his door number. The creature had found him, tracked him somehow across state lines to return the camera. Not in anger, but in acknowledgement. Ethan opened his apartment door slowly. The camera sat there, unharmed, wrapped carefully in moss and leaves. Tucked underneath was something else. A perfect river stone, smooth and black, like the ones used to protect the saplings. A gift. A thank you. A message. I know what you did. I know what you sacrificed. I trust you. Ethan sank to his knees in the doorway, holding the stone, tears streaming down his face for the first time since Sarah's funeral. But these weren't tears of grief. They were tears of connection, of purpose rediscovered, of hope. He'd spent months believing he'd lost everything. But in protecting something that shouldn't exist, something ancient and wise and impossibly gentle, he'd found what Sarah had tried to teach him in those final days. That meaning wasn't found in what you lost, but in what you chose to protect. That humanity wasn't measured in dominance, but in stewardship. That sometimes the most important thing you could do was step back and let something wild, something sacred simply exist. Ethan set up the camera inside his apartment, pointing it at the city beyond his window. He'd document what humans built now, their concrete and steel, their progress and profits. But he'd never forget what he'd seen in that forest. Never stop protecting it, even from a distance. And somewhere in the mountains of Pine Ridge, in a grove of thriving saplings planted by hands not human, a guardian continued its work, raising the forest, teaching the young, trusting that at least one human understood. The footage stayed encrypted. The location stayed secret. The stone stayed on Ethan's desk, a reminder that some things were more important than proof. Some truths were meant to be kept. And some connections transcended species, bridging the gap between what humans were and what they could still become, if they chose nurturing over destruction, protection over profit, trust over fear. Ethan picked up his camera and smiled. He had work to do. The end.